Hello everyone, here I am again recording another Blitz video from another wonderful and very beautiful place. And this time, this Blitz match was played in the Château de Maintenon. It's a castle located in the Eure-et-Loire department of France, not so far away from Paris. This castle was the private residence of the second spouse of Louis XIV, Madame de Maintenon. This castle has a very long history, started to be built in the 13th century and the construction ended in the 18th century, so if only the walls could talk, definitely a place to visit if you were around. And this Blitz match we played just in front of this castle in a very, very beautiful garden of this castle, and my opponent is Axel Delorme, a French grandmaster, my teammate for the Clichy-Echecs team, which we play for in the French team championship, and it was a free day for us. Our teammates went to Chartres to play, and we went to visit this chateau and play some Blitz games. In the first game, that was a very tense draw, with just 2 kings left on the board at the end of it. It was a rook endgame with kings and pawns marches. First, white needed to sacrifice the rook for the h-pawn, but then I was playing black in this game, then I had to sacrifice my rook for the e-pawn, and thus we ended up with 2 kings on the board.
Il y a une partie de combat. Alors il y a dû y avoir des erreurs.
Voilà.
Et par la revanche,
In sitting, dame CD peut-être à la place de cavalier pour pas laisser le pion et pour protéger à côté C6. Je sais pas.
peut-être.
Et du côté des noirs, quand tu as joué déjà avec le pion H et qu'il n'y a plus la perfecte.
The second game was also quite tense, and I was playing white. Let's have a look at this game completely with my comments.
Il n'y a pas de.
Et t'as pas le temps de mater avant quoi. T'as pas le temps de faire un
Pour
truc.
ça, je vais. Ok,
Allez,
l'autre. Parti.
So I started the game with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, and here Axel played quite a rare line that one doesn't often see in the modern chess. He continued the game with bishop e7, which is so-called the Hungarian defense. Since black doesn't fight for the center, after bishop e7, I tried to attack in the center. I tried to play d4. My opponent played d6. And here I just castled. Also d5 and d takes e5 are both very interesting and strong moves. There are several good moves for white in this position. Bishop g4. My opponent replied, and he said that he played this line as a kid, so he knew some theoretical lines probably, and I was playing on my own. h3, and bishop h5. And here the computer suggests a very interesting line with bishop b5, sacrificing a pawn on d4, and then playing c3 and sacrificing one more pawn and trying to use the fact that knight f6 is not possible due to e5. But of course, in a practical game it was too much. I played something else. I played a more solid move. I played c3. The game continued with knight f6, and here finally I played d5, knight b8, and we got this structure where white is pushing in the center. I got more space thanks to d5, but black's position is quite solid, and he wants to counterattack somewhere with f5 or c6. So bishop b3, knight b2, d7, bishop e3 protecting the c5 square. Here g5 would have been a very interesting move, with the idea after bishop takes g5 to take on d5. Quite an interesting tactical point that computer suggests, and nowadays these plans with g5 are quite often to be seen, but my opponent played c6, tried to undermine my center. Of course, I supported it with c4. Here he played knight c5, allowing me to take on c5, and thus making his pawn structure look a little bit bad, with double pawns on the c file. Knight c3, castle. But here the big question is what to do, what plan to pick. First, I tried to bring my knight to the king side, somewhere to f5. I played knight e2, queen b6, I protected the pawn on b2. But then, after my opponent here, after some thought, played knight to e8, I decided that if I play knight g3, then my opponent would probably play g6, and it's not so clear what to do with the knight on g3, so I switched my plan to something else. I decided that my knight doesn't belong to g3, and I played queen g3, attacking the pawn on e5, and after bishop f6, I went back with my knight to the queen side. And actually in this game I cannot really say that I found a good plan to break through, because right now I have a big advantage in the center, but I didn't manage to prove this advantage, to materialize it in a way. Queen c7, a3, a5, queen to e3. Okay, for the moment going back to the center, attacking the pawn on c5, bishop e7, and here again I went back with the knight, but a very good plan would be to prepare f4, g3 and f4 can be suggested instead of my knight's move that is about to be played, knight e2. So going back and forth with the knight, trying to find the right plan, g6, and here I decided to attack on the king side, to prepare the attack. And again, I cannot say that it's the best plan, but any plan is better than no plan at all, as they say. King h1, knight g7, g4, trying to take control over the f5 square, bishop d6, rook g1, king h8. And yes, here I went all in. Queen to h6. Hoping that my knight one day will end up on g5 or f6 and I'll be able to checkmate on h7. Well, it's still quite far ahead. Rook a to e8. My opponent played here, had many nice plans, many nice ideas with undermining my center. Instead, he played with his pieces. Rook a to e8. Rook g3, queen d8, h4, securing my queen here, bishop e7, and here I should have played knight to g1 with this idea. Bishop h4 is bad due to rook h3 and then knight f3. Instead I played rook h3 and thus went away from the g file with my rook, which is not the best idea here, and my opponent quite correctly played here f5, using the fact that my rook has gone away from the g file, and after g takes f5, the knight on g7 is not hanging anymore. Well, that's why I brought another rook, rook g1, attacked the knight on g7, bishop f6, and here f4. Well, a very risky move, opening up the position, but actually not the best one. But somehow it worked out very well, because my opponent immediately made a blunder. E takes f4. He had to protect the knight somehow, because after e takes f4 I play knight takes f4, and I'm threatening to play knight g6, and there is no way to protect it, to protect from this fork. So after some hesitation, my opponent decided to take on e4, but then knight g6 is coming, and I am winning an exchange. And what's even worse, my attack is still going on. It's very strong. Rook takes f8 is not possible due to bishop takes e4. After king takes f8, I have many strong continuations, but in Blitz usually you just pick one line that you like. Queen takes h7, and my idea actually happened in the game. E takes d3, rook f3, pinning the bishop on f6, with the idea after queen e7 to give a very beautiful checkmate. Rook takes g7 or queen takes g7, checkmate. And that's how this game and this match continued. And I hope that you liked this match, and you felt the atmosphere of this nice castle and very beautiful garden.
Danila nous aider.